Welcome everybody. Glad you're here. And we're headed for an incredible heat wave, which is going to be interesting after all this cold weather that we have had. All right, so June is a pretty good month for bee forage, and depending on where you are, you'll see completely different blooms. And it started off earlier in the month with lavenders, maybe some poison ivy came up earlier on. Crown vetch is all over the place still. Bird's foot trefoil, if you know what that is. If you don't know what that is, you can look these items up, or you can use your phone to identify them with applications like iNaturalist or Seek. Chinese privet, if you have privet around you, you will see that it was probably buzzing with bees. And then, of course, right on schedule this year, smooth sumac came out. And that is a boon for bees. And there's so much of it in my area that the trees seem like they have, when you go near them, it's like they have swarms in them. It's so active. And then the native viburnum, if you have any of that, it's a wonderful plant. Small leaf linden is out. That's a hybrid. And then the catalpa tree, but you don't really see honeybees in that. They're blooming right now. They look beautiful. They hold their bloom for quite a while. But so if you see bees, honeybees, that is, or even native pollinators in that catalpa outside of bumblebees, let me know, because I have never really paid attention to that close enough to know if honeybees actually work that plant. I doubt that they work it in mass, because they'd be competing, because sumac would be competing with it, and it's a much easier bloom to get stuff out of. The brambles, as we refer to them, are out, and blackberry, and we'll get raspberries will come out later. American black elderberry, if you are fortunate enough to have any of that near you, bees will work it. It's absolutely beautiful. Edible fruit that you can eat later on in the season when it matures. But when it blooms, if there's a lot of it around, or even one plant, you'll see bees on it. Crazy like. Milkweed probably came out in your area already. It's sort of a little bit behind schedule in my area, but milkweed is one of the most fantastic or interesting plants you can see your bees work. It has an extraordinary way that it is pollinated, and you can watch that process. There's little pollinariums that come out of the milkweed flower, and then it's the bee's job to insert that sac of pollen into the next flower it goes to in another milkweed plant. And so it's an extraordinary pollination ritual for the plant. Milkweed basically does not allow collection of its pollen, but it does allow, its strategy is to foster pollination, but not give the pollen to the bee, but provide plenty of sweet smelling nectar in exchange for its pollination services, which it does. You don't get swamp milkweed or any kind of common milkweed. You don't get that pollen in your colonies. It's just not a pollen that you would recognize. It comes in a sac called a pollinarium. Dogbane, a wonderful sustainer that will bloom now and will continue to bloom all summer long. And it is, if you have a substantial establishment of dogbane, it can hold your colonies over in the dearth, and that will come out a little bit later, along with buckwheat. The astilbes are out, and bees will work white astilbe, but it's not an important bloom form because it's an ornamental plant. But if you have them around, they're very common in people's gardens. That's why I mention them, because they're pollen and is available for bees. I don't think they get nectar out of astilbe, but they do get pollen. And then, of course, the one I wait for every year, American basswood, and I'm talking about the large leaf basswood now, or linden, as they sometimes refer to. I like that. I like the name American basswood because it reminds me of, the Native Americans used to make bows out of it, and we made fishing rods out of it later on. Basswood's an durable wood. And if it blooms in a good year, a single flower will supply enough nectar to satisfy the honey stomach of a single bee. So a bee can go to that tree and land on one flower, and there are millions of flowers on a big established American basswood. And it can fill up with nectar in that one flower and then go back to the colony. So it's a very efficient tree in terms of its supplying nectar to bees. But it's not a reliable source. Some years, if it experiences some cold weather early in spring, it can lose the blooms on all the other parts of the tree, the parts of the tree that were not in sunshine. So usually if it runs into like a light frost or very cold weather in the early spring, the south side will still bloom, but the north, east, and west side will be really sparse blooming plants. And if you know of any basswood trees and you have the time to go and look at them, I suggest you do, because what happens in basswood is the pollinators stratify. The bottom part of the basswood tree has the ground dwelling bees in it. Some native pollinators, and by the way, every pollinator that is around flying will go to basswood because its flower structures, the petal structures on the flower, act like little landing pads. It's almost perfect for any pollinator to come around, rest on the leaf, or rest on the petal of the flower, and suck up the nectar. So it's a really efficient distributor of nectar. So the ground dwellers will go onto the lower levels of a basswood, and then the honeybees will work the top, middle, and top sections. And if it's a good season for basswood, and I don't know if it will be, but if it is, again, if you're under that tree, it sounds like you're in a swarm. Bergamot, echinacea comes out. It's not a really important, unless there's a wild field of echinacea somewhere around you. You won't get enough blooms out of the ornamental stuff that people put in their gardens to make a difference. But it is out there, and bees will work it. They love it. Mint and dill, of course, will be out for a very long time. And those are two wonderful herbs that supply bees with something, I think, nectar and pollen, both. All right. So that's June. And what else have people seen in June? Does anybody have a contribution for our bloom calendar in June?
I do.
Okay. What do you got there, Michelle?
Um, I've never seen this before. I was actually at work in a meeting and I noticed these honeybees going to boxwood bushes, these little tiny bushes, and I couldn't figure out why. So I went out to look and they have these little white flowers on them.
Yes.
And I have boxwoods, but I usually trim them, so maybe that's why I've never seen flowers on them.
Yeah.
But they were all
What
over.
time of year was that? Yeah. What
It
time of
was the first week in June.
Okay, so was privet or is it boxwood?
To me, it looked like boxwood.
Yeah, so so I don't think that's different than Chinese privet, but
Oh,
maybe it
okay. I
is.
didn't know
Yeah,
the
maybe it is. I don't know. I know boxwood is something we use for hedges.
hmm.
Yeah, right? It's boxwood hedge they use.
Yeah. Yeah, they're very small, slow
Yeah,
growing.
very
They're
small little. Yeah,
not
yeah,
taken care of very well at work, so they're
yeah.
kind of
And you were really paying
lousy.
attention during that meeting too, weren't you?
Yeah, which was not good because it was my one-on-one teacher evaluation. So I said to
Uh,
the assistant principal, "Look, there are honeybees on that." And she
yeah.
kind of
She
looked
kind
at
of
me
like looked at
strangely.
looked at you sideways and said, "Well, you might want to pay attention to this meeting."
Yeah,
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 yeah.
but
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have two. For about a week, a low growing ground cover sedum with yellow
Oh, sedum.
flowers.
Yeah,
A sedum, yeah.
yeah.
So that's had some honeybees working it. And then just today, we have a large female winterberry, and the bees are working that well. Oddly enough, where I have a male winterberry, there are very few of its flowers open yet. So,
Mm.
and
Yes. See, I have sedum in July, but that's the tricky part of this, Chuck. I'm glad you mentioned this, is because if you know, there's microclimates around, and there's also different varieties of garden plants like that. Sedum is a wonderful attraction for bees.
And so, for example, like the I think the the number one cultivar of sedum is autumn joy, and that won't be blooming in my garden for another month probably.
Okay, all right. So there you go. So that's another, yeah, so that's probably what I have. That's why I have it down as a July bloom in about a month from now, about 3 weeks from now. So you can see all those blooms that occurred in July, and there's both two kinds of stag sumac that bloom in June, which are significant, and that's the smooth sumac, and then the staghorns coming on. Depending on where you live and depending on the microclimate in your area, those two will trade bloom dates. Sometimes they come on together. Sometimes they're a week apart, which is ideal if that happens, because then bees can move from smooth to staghorn. Usually you don't see staghorn come out before smooth sumac. And we have a third that is not a species that you see a whole lot around, but it's called winged sumac. And that's our July, our August bloom. Yeah, June, July. That's our July bloom. All right, so we have three wonderful sumac flowers that people consider a weed, I think, but they are not a weed. You know, they're a native plant, and they provide lots of, and sumac is edible. You know, I'm an adventurous sort of botanical consumer. That all started in 1968 with me, but well, we won't get into that right now. But anyway, so those I've left some botanicals out of my diet at this point, but I will still make tea from some plants that are around. One is sumac, and it makes a delicious tea, rich in vitamin C. You know, there's a little bit of a hallucinogenic in it. No, I'm just kidding. There's no hallucinogenic. But anyway, all right. So I think we're done unless anybody else has any. Now you will see other things that bees will attach to, and one is chicory. So chicory is a little purple flower that will bloom all summer once it starts to bloom. I don't think it's out yet. Oh yes, it is. I'm sorry. It's later on in June. Chicory will come out, and that flower has an enormous propensity to continue to bloom and provide whatever it provides for bees. I think there's both nectar and pollen that comes back from chicory. It is not a major contributor to anybody's honey, but what we look for as a kind of relief when we think the major flows are over is all of these little sustaining blooms combine to help your colony survive. And the other thing they do is they add a mixture of pollen into those that provide pollen will add their sort of amino acid content to the pollen that bees are bringing back, and it makes for a richer brood food, a more nutritious brood food for bees to feed, for bees to consume, nurse bees to consume in the colony, and then transfer it over to make brood food and feed young bees. So Peter, is your stuff about temperature or is it about blooms?
Well, actually, I could show you a little bit about both, and I won't take up much time.
Don't worry about that.
Okay.
You're a contributor. We need contributors. Go ahead.
Okay, so we do have a tool to track blooms that people are seeing, just like Bill was talking about. And you could put them in here, and you know, so we have some history. We build some history for what happened this year. It's a new tool, so not that many people have put data in there. I put a lot of data in there. But you can get to it from the resources tab on the ctbees.org site. It's under resources. It's called the Bloom Tracking Tool. So it's right up here. Currently, it's in the top left corner. That'll take you to a web worksheet. It looks like Excel. It's called Google Sheets, but basically it's effectively Excel. And you could just put put your data in here. I've put a lot of data in here. Chuck has just put some data in there today, I guess. And a couple other people have also.
That's great.
And this will, I mean, I could give you an example real quick. And for observer, you can put anything you want. You can put your initials. You don't have to put your full name or anything like that. It's totally up to you. You know, whatever you're seeing, and just like you could put the botanical name or the common name, and it will look up matches. Now I just put dogwood, and dogwood's kind of fading out at this point, but it gives you, you know, some options here, and that's it. Now, if you want to
Well,
look, pardon me?
It populates that column with images, right?
Correct. So that's what this is. If you actually want to see the image, you could just click on that link there.
Yeah.
And anyway, so all this data then goes into effectively a database, which is this link here. You can kind of see it says click here to link to the CBA bloom tracker. All right, and this is just a again a database of what everybody's seen, and same data you saw on the worksheet. You don't have to input anything here. This is just for analysis, and you can filter on a whole bunch of things, including like this is set right now for the last 30 days, I guess. But you could change that to see what you know, what we've captured all year. And then based on town, you know, as we fill up more of this, if we get more people inputting stuff, you could filter on town and see what was, and that was when I was at the extension, Norwich Extension. There were a couple there that I recorded. And that's one piece. And then the other piece is this database. So this is, there's a list of, I don't know, something like 470 plants behind here. And so if you wanted to look, for example, what to expect in July, you can just like put bloom month. It'll show you a lot of plants that may be blooming in July, understanding, of course, that some of them may not be huge pollen or nectar sources.
Right.
As for value, you could put high in here, and that'll give you some plants that are very high as far as value to honeybees, or medium high, and you can get as, you know, detailed as you want here. So I think what the hope here is that we just gather a lot of data and are able sort of at the end of the year to summarize it and maybe compare it historically as we move forward. And you know, I'll take any recommendations or comments to improve this. There's other ways to show the data, but this is what I've come up with, at least to begin with.
Well, I mean, I think that it's a wonderful effort, Peter. And not only that, it's
Thanks.
valuable to beekeepers in ways that they may not even realize, because if you're sitting there with 1 or 2 colonies in your backyard and you're seeing pollen come in and you're wondering what's going on, this is a place where you can come and get your answers, right? Like what is blooming now in July or June or August or September, you know, and it takes away a little bit of the anxiety about, because you get you constantly wonder, what are my bees collecting? Is there enough resources out there for them to sustain their population? And this is a real anxiety lowerer if you get to use it. And we've gone through, Peter's gone through 2 or 3 different ways to sort of encourage us to use this data and or collect data. And we started off with Seek and iNaturalist and all that. That got a little bit complicated for folks to use. This is really straightforward, in my opinion. And because it gives you a photo image of the plant, you are just like, it's doing the work for you. You know, you can just go look and say, what did I think I saw? I think I saw basswood. And what does it look like? It gives you a photograph of the flower. So can't ask for anything better. I love it. Thank you so much, Peter.
Yep. And just one other quick thing. For anybody that uses these sensors in their hives, I had something interesting yesterday where I had a swarm in one of my hives,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see it here. It's the one in blue,
Yeah.
and maybe if you can see right here, it lost 7 pounds in the matter of, I don't know, 20 minutes or something like that. And also what's interesting is there was a temperature spike. So as before the swarm, as the bees are warming up their wing muscles, they're going around the hive, warming up their wing muscles, and then they all go out at the same time. So if anybody's interested in some of these tools, this is the type of thing you can do, you can look at. Now, I don't have real-time reporting, but if you invest in that, you can get alerts on your phone exactly when it happens.
It's
I think what's
fabulous.
also, I'm
Yep.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, if like, did my colony swarm? And here's the thing, in my opinion, if you're a hobbyist and you're not doing this for money and you want to learn as much as you can about your bees and you're curious about their biology, these tools can help you understand it in a way that you can't learn from books or anything else. Now, that event that you saw there where the bees lost 7 pounds and they also had this wonderful high temperature, that's a combination of, that's probably a prime swarm. 7 pounds of bees is quite a lot of bees. I mean, that's 7 pounds of bees will be 20,000 bees or more. And they've taken some honey with them also. Not a lot because they can't carry a whole lot. So that's probably they've taken way less than a pound of honey with them. If you calculate their mass, and they can take maybe 80 milligrams of honey per piece, and times 20,000 bees, you'll get the number of honey, the amount of honey they can possibly take. But you can see all of that data tracked in this brood minder. So it's really it's interesting. It keeps you engaged in your hobby, and it's valuable information also.
Yeah, and this is fairly typical for what I've seen, at least here in Westbrook, is in late May. I see this sudden, gain in weight, and these little these peaks that happen right about now. I took it shortly before we started here, and the peaks usually happen between like 5 and 8 p.m. this time of year, and then overnight they lose 3 or 4 pounds from evaporation. So it's
Well, from curing the honey. So
right. Yep.
they got nectar has a big water content. They cure the honey at night. They evaporate that water content, as you say, and then it falls down onto the bottom board or out your screen bottom board or something like that. If you have a tray down there, you wouldn't believe how much water will be in that tray in the morning in a heavy flow. All right, so let's move on to some questions we have in the chat. So I'll see if I can get these questions up and read them. All right, so we got at 6:30. KP asked, "Can you discuss sac brood? Does it always have that pointed end sticking up?" Well, sac brood is very easy to diagnose. Now, it does have a sac, which you can actually see sticking up in the cell. Now, if you go look at pictures of sac brood on the internet, and you can ID it that way, or you can call Paula. Paula will come out and take a look at your colony and help diagnose that for you if it's sac brood that you are actually concerned with at this point. Great. Yeah. Sac brood, I get, if you're a novice and you've never seen sac brood before, you might be mistaking that for another disease-related malady in the colony. There are other things that bees may have uncapped brood, and you're looking at that. So it can get a little tricky. We don't really have a sac brood test kit, do we, Paula? Not it's because sac brood is a virus. All right, so we don't get that. The bacterial stuff we do have things for. that we can test, use for that. All right. So a long-term beekeeper who keeps good records has said that in prior years with more than normal rain, the spring flow extended significantly. Is that something people have experienced? So, I mean, I'll let anybody chime in and think that they have an extended period. I did notice this year that the blooms were really prolific. And that is rain related, but extending it is not that's part of the plant's phenology, and that's hard to influence. But the actual amount of blooms it can be significantly different. So anybody see any bloom times or looking at bloom stuff that extended that bloom? I mean, I think I saw a normal range of blooms. I mean, a normal time for blooms, but a really prolific bloomscape, like lots of flowers on stuff, and so forth. Yeah, because it's really nourishing. A lot of rain is really nourishing. It gets into the ground, they pull minerals up, and they can make more flowers. All right. So purple lucerne, Jacob's ladder, lacy, Celia, and prickly pear. Prickly pear. Yeah, I forgot about cactus. Yeah, we don't have any cactus. Loosestrife. Yellow loosestrife, I think, is a cultivar, or maybe it isn't. Maybe it's a different plant. But the one that we have in our wetlands here is purple loosestrife. And that's a plant that is controversial because it will take over wetlands. It does flower or bloom prolifically and provides lots of nutrition and pollen for native pollinators and honeybees, but it is not something that folks that have more say in what blooms are allowed in terms of invasives. They have taken on the role of killing the purple loosestrife by bringing in a biological agent, a bug that is specialized in eating loosestrife, and it's very successful at being able to control it. But then loosestrife comes back with sort of a vengeance at some point, and then it fades off again. And then the next year it'll come back with diminished quantity. And then the following year it might be even a little bit more robust. So it wanes, it waxes and wanes with the biological that it supports. So Chuck has asked the temperature, well, he's making a comment that the temperature sensors have been so helpful to me as a new beekeeper. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, you can do that. I mean, and so you're gonna have to learn, like Peter does, and anybody who experiments with those things, what you're seeing, and after a while, you'll become very proficient at understanding those temperature variations. And you can actually see a flow in your colony by observing, as Peter mentioned, the difference between the weight in the evening and then how it loses weight over the night. So you can get kind of an idea how much nectar your bees are bringing in. And then, of course, the other absolute test for that is to lift the hive and see if you can feel the weight. So if you have your temperature sensor that's indicating that you're getting a lot of nectar in that colony, the other thing you can do is go out and lift it from the back, called hefting, and you can verify that way that the colony is gaining weight. And if your sensors continue to read like in a fashion that's indicating that they're gaining a lot of strength, and you'll also feel that in the weight of the colony. That's the old school way of doing it. All right, so Michelle is asking, I hope this is okay to put in the chat. This summer I'm doing research problem master beekeepers. Okay, and a few questions providing clean water for honeybees, and notice I'm going to dirty water sources instead. If you would like to help me out by giving me input on the subject, here's the link. There's a bunch of scientific studies out on this, Michelle. Just research them, and you'll be able to see your exact study where folks have, scientists have done peer-reviewed studies that show that the kind of minerals and muddy water that bees prefer, and so on and so forth. So you're not alone in this.
Yeah, I
And
was just hoping this have a conversation with a bunch of other beekeepers to see what they've seen.
yeah, well, bees, yeah, I mean, I can tell you just my experience, and maybe other people can chime in. Bees will always go to a puddle, muddy water. They will lay on top of moss in a tree stump, and they'll go to a compost pile. So whatever it is, and moss, especially if you had a limb cut off of a tree and it left a little hole, and inside of that a little ecosphere develops where there's some little plants, little tiny plants, and some moss like spilling out over that hole. Bees will suck the moisture out of that stuff, they just love it. And yeah, so dirty water is not something that will deter bees from collecting it. And of course, we would not drink that. And so when we anthropomorphize our thoughts about bees, we think, well, they should really prefer clean water. But we don't have their same mineral requirement, and we don't have their sensitivity to environmental minerals where they know they can get them. Salt being a very important one for them. So that's why they go to saltwater pools, or they go to chlorinated pools where salt is a constituent. So bees will go after dirty water. I mean, if anybody else wants to chime in and answer that, you can go to her. What is that you have there, Michelle?
The Google form,
Okay, she has a Google form. All right, there you go.
just asking 4 questions, basically,
Okay, all right.
for you to, for people to give their input of what they've seen. And also, if they're providing a clean water source, are there bees, like you said, still going to dirty water?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, well, I can tell you for a fact that yes, they are.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm just glad I don't have any cow dung distillates around, or cat like
That would
guess
not,
they really like that from what I've been reading. They like puddles with cow dung in them.
yeah, yeah. So, yep. And they're going to work that through their own biology. So it's not something that
Mm.
is a problem. All right, let me break for some raised hands. So, Laura?
Yes, I just wanted to add that we have ducks, and they are often found in our duck ponds and in our duck waterers, which we change every day, but the ducks can make it real messy in about 2 seconds, and they still drink from it. So
Yeah, no problem. And uh, Troy?
oh, that was me.
No, I'm good.
He's with that. He's with me.
Oh, you guys. Oh, okay. I see. Laura and Troy. I thought those were two separate people, but I'm sorry about that. All right. Okay. So let's see. So Chuck wants to know, is a single brood management feasible with a 8-frame deep? So I think with an 8-frame deep, you're on the borderline of single brood box. I would risk saying you don't have enough space in an 8-frame, because if you do the calculation, and this is very easy to do, figure out the amount of cells that are on a standard length frame, worker frame cells. And of course, you have to consider both sides. Then you take that and multiply it times say 8 or 10, and then you take 80% of that number, or between 75 and 80% of that number. That's the laying space available for the queen. Then you take like 1,500 or 1,800 eggs a day, and you divide that into that space, and it'll give you the amount of days that it will take for the queen to lay through 80% of those frames. Now, 80% of the laying space in those frames. And that will come out in a 10-frame box. That'll come out to over 21 days, which means that the queen cannot lay out before other broods emerging. She can't fill a 10 frame before the first egg she laid way back in the day, 21 days ago, are emerging, right? She still has space to lay. So, but I don't know if that calculation works for 8 frames. I never did it, but it definitely works for 10 frame hives. And we know it works for 10 frame hives because everybody does it. So, but I've never heard anybody try a single brood box with 8 frames. So I got a feeling you're on the borderline because you've taken away, you know, lots of 6,000 cells or something that are available with those 2 frames that are missing. So,
Thanks, Bill.
okay. All right. So George has a couple of swarm trap questions. Let's have them, George.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So after the last event at the bee yard, I came home and I made a swarm trap like the one you had by your shed there,
Yeah.
just for the fun of it. Put it in a tree last weekend, about 10 feet off the ground, and I went out there tonight and there's some activity around there.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's scout bees that are out looking for a place or just some, you know, just bees out looking around. So my question is, if they are scout bees, how long before they would decide to take up residence? That's the
Well, they'll
first
take up,
question.
yeah, okay. So let me ask you a question about where the swarm, not how high it is, or is it located close to your yard?
It's about 75 feet away from
Okay.
my house.
So what, and what did you put inside of it?
Old comb, you know, drawn out comb from last year. So kind of brown. I tried to pick the stuff that was smelly.
Okay.
Nothing in it, just the comb.
That's good. Just
Yep.
a comb.
Yep.
All right. 1 or 2 combs, right? So,
Yeah,
so
two. It's a deep with 2 frames of
2
drawn
frames of brood, right?
Yep.
Drawn, old,
old drawn comb. Yep.
tarish comb.
Yep.
All right. So it can, when there are scout bees looking to go in that swarm box, there will be a lot of them. So you'll see like 8 or 10 bees darting in and coming out again. That's actually a indication that scouts are looking at that frame. Now, what that alerts me to in my years of bee practice, when I was trying to figure out what if there was a colony in a yard ready to swarm, I would use it as an indicator. So now you'd have to go in and look at your colonies and figure out if one of them is trying to swarm. So it can be an early warning sign for you to use, right? It's that, yes, there's scouts out looking at a box, but remember that if there's 1 or 2 bees going in and out, maybe not. But if there's 5 or 6 of them, then they're looking, that's one of the locations that the scouts are dancing for the final location. Yeah, I think you saw last week when there was lots of scout bees going around that swarm box.
Yep.
Okay, so, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's several. It's not just 1 or 2.
Okay,
So,
all right.
So they may scout before actually swarming.
Oh yeah. Oh no, they're definitely scout before actual swarming. Now, so
Okay.
so in that case, if those bees have scouted that area and they haven't swarmed yet, which you probably have, or, you know, there's 2 other things. There could be a swarm hanging somewhere that you haven't noticed.
Yeah,
And
right.
yeah, and those scouts are looking to bring the bees to that as a permanent location.
Right.
So it can be
Okay.
a precursor to swarms that are going to occur in your colony, or it can be that they've already occurred, and the swarms and the scouts are looking to come there locate. So now, if they come to that box, that's where they chose to live, and then
Yep.
you got all right. So you know what to do from then on. I know you do.
Well, that's sort of part 2 of my question. Well, so I guess really part 1 of my question was, and I guess it sounds like if they're scouting, it's within a few days that
Yes.
they would swarm if they choose that spot. So
Yeah.
then if they do choose that box, how long do I have to move it to a permanent location?
You can leave it there. Well, so I never let them stay in a swarm box for more. See, but I have a special privilege of being able to go to the yard and look every day. So
Yeah.
I won't let a swarm box stay occupied with a swarm for more than a day or two. Because what they start to do, and as I showed you at the yard, they'll start to build comb in there and they'll start to do all kinds of crazy stuff. And you want to get them out of there and bring them to a permanent location. But that is their permanent location. If they go in the box as a swarm, they have decided to live there. And then you've got to, now you've got to relocate that swarm box somewhere
Right.
away from, okay, so you know that routine.
Well, that's sort of my question. So can I relocate them 75 feet away to where my bee
No.
yard is?
Nope, they'll go right back to that tree location where that box was, and you'll lose a large percentage of the field force.
Could I locate them 10 feet lower at the base of the tree?
No, you cannot fool them. They will go back to the height of that box wherever it was. So they have the bees that have gone in that swarm box are being led by the
Yep.
queen scent and those scout bees, and they'll just go back there. You'll lose a big portion of it. You got to. So what I used to do, even in the middle of the winter time, in summertime when it's really hot out and bees swarmed into a swarm trap and they wouldn't all go in because it was too crowded in there, I would still collect them at night. That night with a red flashlight or no flashlight at all, and close I had a little screen that you could I think I showed you at the yard. You could just close them, and close them and take them. And I had a dumping yard, which was like 4 miles away, and I would bring them out there and let them. And actually, I close them up at night. Excuse me. Here's the routine I used: close them up at night, take the swarm box, put it in my truck, bring it to the location the next morning, and then transfer them over into a regular colony, a regular hive with, either drawn comb and resources or foundation. And then I would feed them and let them draw comb there. And then after about 2 or 3 weeks, I could bring them and put them anywhere. You can bring them back and put them in your yard. But you need a temporary location. How far are you from the bee yard?
From 15 miles. I live in Guilford.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, if you don't have a place to put them, you can put them in the bee
I
yard.
could park them there for a few days and bring them back or something.
Yeah, you gotta leave them there for
Experiment.
almost a week, but
A week, yeah.
you're welcome to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, good,
Okay.
good learning.
All right. This is one from for Paula. Paula, you want to answer Russ's questions? It's does anyone know of a source for EFB and AFB test kits?
So Beetle Pharma makes a EFB, AFB test kit, but a couple years ago, maybe at least a year ago, they ran into some sort of customs issues. And so you can't really find them anywhere in the United States. I talked to them at one of the bee conferences in the winter, and they said that I could get them like as a research institution. I could get like a big bulk order of them, but in order to do that, I have to get a grant and
Get money.
so I can fund it. So it's possible, but I haven't been able to put all those pieces in the puzzle, to make it all fit yet. But we can send in samples to the Beltsville Bee Lab, and that's free. And you can Google it, and the instructions for sending in the samples are right there on their website. You can submit comb or dead bees or different things. But of course, give me a call and I can come out and take a look and tell you what I think, and I can submit the sample for you. So
okay, great. I mean, so that's an alternative, and maybe Paula, you can brush up or because we never had the horizontal bleed for either of those, and we would always use the Holtz test, the milk test.
yeah,
And you know about that test?
yeah.
And you can do that on site, or would you not do it on site? You don't do it. Do you?
Usually I look at it and then I submit the sample to Beltsville.
Okay.
But
All right. But you can do the ropey test for American.
oh yeah, I'll do that for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. Yeah. So Paula has some some other tools that will help her diagnose. And I'm sure that she'd be able to tell you in a minute if it's AFB or EFB. A little bit harder to do because you could have a another pathogen in there that is not sort of they call it it's a something pathic brood syndrome, but it means that you can't really it's an atypical bacterial.
Idiopathic, Russ says.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is, yeah.
Yeah, idiopathic, right. Idiopathic brood syndrome is what it is. And the idiopathic mimics some bacterial infections that may look like EFB, but there's a difference in the way that they smell. All right, let's get on. Laura and you have another question over there, Laura. So Laura's asking if their hive has a gable roof and the bees have been drawing and storing honey up there. Well, how are they getting up there?
They're going through the hole in the top. What do we
Oh
call
yeah,
this
you
thing?
gotta keep them
The
out of there.
top.
Yeah, you gotta keep them out of that thing.
So
Yeah.
I just block it.
Well, yeah, you don't want them in that gable roof, because they're treating that like a honey super.
Right. That's
they're in heaven. Wow, we got another little piece of architecture of their furniture to build more honey in. And yeah, so yeah. Yeah,
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you got to keep your bees. Try to keep them down into the box somehow. Yeah, so going into a vent hole on the outside.
No, they're going through the top board underneath the telescoping cover.
Oh, you put
Inner cover.
Okay, so you put the inner cover on. They're going through the porter bee escape hole.
Correct.
And you got to block that.
Because we usually feed them from that hole.
Yeah, but they're treating that as part of the hive.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, gotta stop that if you can. All right, so Teresa has said that she lost her hive to small hive beetle infestation, and I did too last year. I lost one. It is horrible to do because of the persistent, ugly larval puking and defecating in your wonderful honeycomb. What's the process for cleaning out the boxes for any frames of capped honey? Well, if they did not get to the capped honey down in your brood box, that's fine. The good thing about small hive beetles is they're not vectoring viruses or anything else into your colony. So, they are ruining it, and they're horrible to have, but they're not dangerous from a biological standpoint. Outside the fact that they kill the colony.
Yeah, Bill, I think that they definitely have gotten down into the honey stores, like some of them. Because
Well,
I put some in the freezer and for a couple of days, like 72 hours, and then I pulled it out and then larvae had come to the surface. It was frozen, small hive larvae all over the surface of the kept honey. So I just need to get rid of all of that, just scrape everything and.
Well, I mean, no, I mean, the bees aren't going to do anything with that. See, what happens is the honey ferments because because small hive beetle larvae will tunnel through it and leave their excrement behind, and and then that's it. They put all kinds of pollutants in the honey and it ferments.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not.
All right. Well, I'll be starting from square one in the spring then.
Yeah, I mean, you lost the colony now today. I mean, this year.
Yeah, I came out of winter with 2 of 4, and both of those I figured it out too late that they were both in small hive beetle infested. And I think that was probably what I was doing was the weaker hive. I was putting brood, a couple frames of brood into the weaker hive from the stronger hive. So I think where I really found it heavily was in the stronger hive, but I had taken brood frames from that to add to the weaker hive to help them build up, and I think I infected them by doing it.
So I mean, it's a good lesson for everybody to hear, and I'm sure that I'm sure that as a person who's dealing with disease a lot, like Paula is, that beekeepers can be a a horrible vectoring source for the transfer of disease into colonies. As a matter of fact, we're probably the number one dangerous environmental interference in bee colonies that we vector more stuff in. If you move your American foul brood frames around, you'll put it in your whole colony. You'll put it in your whole yard. If you're transferring brood frames around in your own yard and they're diseased, or they're carrying beetles over with them, or they have a high mite count, you're just spreading all of that stuff around. So you have to be very careful in terms of both your sanitation and your attention to what pests are in your colony, especially in a small hive beetle season. Now, I noticed last year when we had the horrific small hive beetle infestation, and lots of folks that kept bees last year in Connecticut and had lots of colonies lost them to small hive beetles, lost at least some. And I found out last year that small hive beetles will, and I've been keeping bees for quite a while in Connecticut, but I never saw small hive beetles reproduce in the trays that I was using to put drop boards on so I could use varroa count. So the pollen that's coming into the colony is stripped off of sometimes off of bees' hind legs before it actually gets into the cell, or in the process of putting it in the cell, they kick it off and it falls down and goes through the screen bottom board, finds its way onto that drop board sheet. But the interesting thing is that some curing nectar will put a film of moisture on that goes underneath that sheet, but in the meantime, it dissolves some of the pollen. So it makes this extraordinarily nourishing liquid for small hive beetle larvae. And the small hive beetle goes down there because they're chased down there. They lay eggs underneath the drop board, and before you know it, you've got a population of larvae in your varroa tray. It's just horrible. And I also saw last year bees. I have my colonies on cement blocks, and you've got screen bottom boards on there, and pollen will drop out of those screen bottom boards, because only, you can see, I've shown folks in the bee yard this number of times how much pollen actually does not get into cells that bees diligently bring back to the colony, but it never makes it into a cell. It falls through those screen bottom boards, and it may land on the cement block. And then the small hive beetle go down there and lay eggs near that pollen or on the pollen. You may not even see it because it could be where the front of your bottom board, where you're not looking. And next thing you know, you've got larvae pouring over the side of that cement block that you are keeping your bees on. So be very careful to examine all parts of your bee yard. This year, I'm gonna say this with some trepidation and be hopeful about it, but I don't see any small hive beetles around at all. I trapped all winter long. I trapped early spring. I did have some surviving beetles, but nothing in the yard so far this year. So I'm like really, really happy about that. All right, a couple of final comments, then I have to go. Please check our website out, ctbees.org. Look for our guest speakers. Use our resource page. It's got so much good information now. People are making contributions about pesticide stuff. and, you know, how to apply pesticides and how to contact Paula about, you know, your hive inspections, and bloom stuff is in there, and how to tell the difference between wasps and bees and native pollinators, and got all kinds of stuff. So get in there and take a look at all. You can almost, it's almost for sure you can answer almost every question you might come up to think about if you look at our resource section. And I thank you for coming tonight.